And he said, so if you're going out and it's raining, what would you say to her? And I said, I'd say to her, I'll take your coat. And then he said, what do you do if she says no? And I'd say, I might encourage her, but then I'd just sort of say, well, that's how you'll learn, by getting wet. And he went, no. He said, all she'll learn is that you could have helped her, but you didn't. And it just floored me. And I felt that she put right a lot of the things that she felt she hadn't done right as a mother, but would never admit it. She was very stressed and very isolated. And that's such a big deal, because motherhood shouldn't be about being isolated. That's not how we've evolved to be. We are social animals, and we should, from an anthropological point of view, we need people around us.
So what do you think your children have sort of taught you or helped you realise about yourself?
I think I've said it. I think they've taught me to love and be loved, unconditionally.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships podcast with me, Lucy Cavendish, your host. Today, I'm really thrilled and grateful to be with columnist Annalisa Barbieri. She does the Ask Annalisa column for The Guardian and The Observer. She's a podcaster, a broadcaster, and a writer, and she also is a chocolate correspondent. So she's the only chocolate correspondent I know, and she writes a lot of interesting things about it, so you can check her out if you want to know about that. But today we're here and we're going to talk about motherhood. So before we get into it, just welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Lucy, for having me.
So we had a little bit of sort of talking and emailing about what felt you would like to talk about, and what you said that you would like to talk about today is motherhood and your feelings around that. So I'm just wondering what it was that made you think, oh, that's what I want to talk about.
I think we can have extraordinary relationships with lots of things. I think that motherhood has been my favorite phase of my life so far.
Yes.
And I really enjoy it, and I really love it, and I really like my children, and I think that's sometimes not madly fashionable. I've never really cared about what's fashionable. And I just think that's my experience of motherhood. Was it always like that? No. Is it always like that? No. But it's not quite what I thought it would be like, which begs the question of what did you think it would be like? And I can't remember. So I can't remember how I thought it would be, but I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I'm enjoying it.
So tell me about how many children you've got, and what ages are they?
I have two girls. They're 16 and 22.
Yeah. And how's that? 16 and 22, good ages. I mean, lots of people roll their eyeballs when you say the number 16. They go, oh no, a teenager.
Yeah, I've never really understood that. But we have to caveat all this with the fact that I do an extraordinary job, which is that I speak to people, psychotherapists and psychoanalysts and psychiatrists and psychologists and all the psychs, and I learn so much from them. And I don't think I would be the mother I am if I didn't do the job I do. And for the first 5 years of my eldest daughter's life, I didn't do that job. And I don't think I was very true to myself, actually. In those first 5 years, I think I was repeating what I'd seen and how I'd been mothered. I mean, I wanted to become a mother because I'd had a really nice childhood. And so my mother did a lot of things right. And obviously in any, whenever there's a child, there's an egg and a sperm involved. There's two people involved. So as my mum and my dad, I think we're very quick to talk about the things that mothers do wrong.
Yeah, we are.
I really loved my parents. They're both dead now, and they did some amazing things. They didn't get everything right, of course. But I did repeat certain things. But I think the big thing is I hadn't really understood about children, but also I really hadn't understood about how your parentage affects how you parent, but how anything to do with you that may not be resolved can come out when you have a child. And I
Mm.
learned all that. So I was able to separate out my stuff and their stuff.
Mhm.
And that not only made me a much more effective parent, but it freed me from a lot of crap, really. And I was able to concentrate on the job in hand. And, children aren't put on the earth to kind of test their parents, which is sometimes what I think people think.
What
Um,
by test?
well, they're not being naughty on purpose. They're not attention seeking. All that stuff that you hear again and again and again. Um, they're not. They're not. They don't hate you, even if they say they do sometimes. I
Mhm.
just learned a lot about child psychology, and that really, really changed the way I parented, the way I mothered, since I'm a mother.
There's so much interesting stuff in that. I mean, I remember people with my eldest son, who's now nearly 30, saying when he was little, because he was screaming and crying for all sorts of reasons, oh, he's attention seeking. And I would say, yeah, so maybe what I'm going to do is give him some attention. I mean, I was like, what is wrong with being attention seeking? I mean, why shouldn't children ask their parents to give them attention?
Well, children have needs, don't they?
Mm,
Um, and I think, obviously I've learned a lot about projection, which you must have learned a lot about in your training as a therapist. And it's interesting now what people project onto children.
mm, mm,
Um, and but it has an effect. I mean, like I said, I'm not normal in that respect. I mean, I sometimes joke that I've spoken to more therapists than anyone else in the world. Doing this job for nearly 20 years, I speak to a therapist pretty much every day. I'm not good at maths, but that's a lot of people. And a lot of people have taught me things. I'd always come off the phone thinking, oh, yes, things like toddlers learn movement before they learn reason. So they'll run across a room and hit their sibling before they can think about it. They're simply not capable of thinking about what to do. I also, not long after I had my first daughter, I co-founded a parenting website which doesn't exist anymore, and it was called I Want My Mum. And I
mm,
named it that because all the way through pregnancy, and all the way through, when I had a child, I kept saying, I want my mum, I want my mum. And
mm.
I learned a lot from the mothers on there. It was quite a small group. But like, for example, I never put my children in time out. I always put them in time in. I always I've never disciplined my children. Um,
Oh,
and
right.
and I just, and to me everything is about talking and discussion, because I didn't really have that growing up. Italian parenting styles are quite different. People always think, oh, Italians love children. They do, and there's a lot of things they do right, but it's all about the elders. You must respect the elders. But then I remember, like, the older people saying, oh, I don't remember a thing, mi scordo tutto, non mi ricordo niente, I'm forgetting everything. But then when you corrected them, because children have great memories, they'd go, that's not what happened. And I think there was quite a lot of injustice. I think children are great at justice, and there was a lot of that. And you couldn't really discuss things like no was no. And that's not how I've raised my girls. I've raised them to say they don't agree with me, to tell me why, and we'll always have a discussion about it. I mean, people always roll their eyes when I tell them this. It takes a long time and it takes a lot of input. But, I'm raising women. I want them to know their own minds. I want them to know their opinion matters. I've always asked their permission before. I mean, I've never put photos of them on social media without their permission. I certainly didn't do it when they were young. They were and are individuals, and that's how I've always approached it.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This season on The Infinite Life, Consciousness Raising, Spiritual Transformation, we dive into the vibration that connects us all, love. From divine devotion with the Bhakti Marga Swami to cosmic connection with a Vedic astrologer, to the redemptive power of love through an ex-inmate's story, each conversation opens a new doorway into the heart. Love takes infinite forms, transformative, divine love, new love, and the love we reclaim within ourselves. This is more than a podcast, it's a remembrance.
That is fascinating. There's so much that you're saying that's really fascinating. So I just want to rewind this, because it's like you are the font of knowledge. In those few minutes, you've said some really interesting things. So I was going to get a T-shirt which just said "Always blame the mother." Yeah. Why is it that women cop the blame for stuff? Mothers, sorry, in parenting more so than men, I think.
Because they're so present, I think, and it's easy. And sometimes mothers do terrible things. Sometimes dads do. I have a thing. Sometimes the readers say to me, "Oh, you're blaming the reader. Forget about mothers or fathers for a minute." And I'm very much about taking responsibility for our own behavior because that is all we can do.
Yeah.
And sometimes if someone says, if you do that, if you say that to a child, that's going to make them feel like this. Is that blaming or is that pointing out their behavior so that they can change it?
Yeah.
When someone said to me, well, that might not be the best thing to say to a child. Sure, it's easy to kind of think, oh, I've done it wrong and, I've fucked them up and whatever. But then you think, well, I can change it. And that's what really matters to me. I just think if you take responsibility, you can change things. And that's all we have power over. As we know, you can't change anybody else's behavior. God knows, if only. So I think, but to answer your question, I think it's just because, well, women have always been an easy target. We're half the world. We're demonized. We're so powerful.
Yes.
And people don't like that. And I think people have complicated relationships with their mothers without understanding that a lot of the time it's not personal. It's how they were parented. I mean, that's another thing that unshackles you from the past. And, when I first heard that, I remember thinking, how can it not be personal if a mother talks to their child like that? But what it meant was it was just that kind of learned behavior. It wasn't because the child was bad, because I don't believe children are born bad.
No, I think all children are born into joyful aliveness.
And I think that, what was that? All children are?
Born into, hopefully more or less, born into joyful aliveness. They're joyfully alive. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, we know now if you want to get really into the whole brain thing that people can be born with certain tendencies to certain types of behavior.
Yes.
But as Sue Gerhardt said, love matters and how affection shapes a baby's brain and it can have a profound effect. And I think that stuff is really hard to read if you've had children and they're grown up. But I think, Naomi Stadlen, who died recently and wrote What Mothers Do, especially when it looks like nothing, sort of taught me that it's never too late to say sorry. And sorry really matters to children and taking responsibility. But if you yourself have gone into motherhood with, I don't know, guilt and shame, and because that's the way that you were parented, you were mothered or parented, then that's very difficult. To then separate out, as I said, your needs and the child's needs. And guilt, as I say, almost every week is the enemy of confident parenting.
Yeah.
And as a mother, I think you need to be confident. I mean, almost everything I'm saying also applies to the father, but I'm talking as a mother. So
yes. Guilt is the enemy of
confident parenting. Because if you're feeling guilty, you're not. Because sometimes we need to say no. I do say no to my children. They don't run riot. I always taught them from an early age, it's about appropriate behavior. I wouldn't have taken them to a Michelin-starred restaurant at 8 p.m. because that's asking a lot of a young child.
Yeah. Don't ask them to do things that they can't
exactly.
do.
And never ask them to do something that you would find difficult. But, if I took them to a restaurant, I would say, people have paid money to be here. We need to behave in a way that's appropriate. But if I go to a playground and they're running around screaming, I will defend their right to run around and scream.
Yes,
I will defend their right not to kiss, an Italian relative that doesn't want to kiss them, which causes a lot of criticism in Italy. But, as a child, I was made to kiss all sorts of people. I didn't want to, and no one listened to what I wanted. And, that's problems with my children. I'm like, if you want to say hello, you want to kiss that person, you do, but I will defend your right. So I think it's about appropriate behavior rather than obedience. I didn't raise my girls to be obedient.
No, good. But a lot of people find this very difficult. A lot of people find what I would call conscious parenting. So, or other people call child-led. People say it's child-led parenting, and children shouldn't be given that amount of power. I think it's very nuanced, that, isn't it?
Oh yeah, you can't let a child lead parenting. I'm in charge, and they know that. And you have to be the backbone as the parent and say no. But I discuss things, I listen to them, and sometimes they convince me and they say, la la la, I go, okay, I famously didn't let my youngest doesn't have social media, and my eldest didn't have it till she was 17. That took a lot of discussion. But I said to her, I've got vision that can see into the future and see. It sounds, I don't have magical powers. I can see things, and I know things that you don't yet know, and I'm not trying to stop you having fun.
Yes.
I just want to protect you. But we discussed it, and I listened about why social media was really important, but the answer was still no. And then we went on to write a piece about it was the best thing I'd ever done for her. My youngest is still too young, but I know about child development. I certainly don't know everything there is to know, but I know more than I did, and perhaps more than the average person. And I know how we form in those years. And why would I want my children to form their opinion of themselves through people they'd never met? It's hard enough, as we know as adults, being on social media. So I think I've kind of slightly run away from the question. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, I'm interested in
Of
this.
what you asked, but it's because everything I do is because of what I've learned through my job, and I'm just so grateful for it.
So, just into the social media thing with a 16-year-old, I imagine that she probably talked to you about FOMO. Everyone else is on social media and not me. And it makes, I'm not sure that is what she said, but I think for a lot of kids, it's like, I don't want to be the only person who's not in the club.
Yeah, they did. I don't think she was the only girl. But yeah, no, she did. That's what she said. And what did I say? I said, I completely get that. I really, really understand that. And I'm trying to balance up the risks of social media against you feeling like that. But you won't always feel like that. I think when you're a teenager, I don't know, Lucy, how much you remember about adolescence.
I remember a lot.
Me too. I remember a lot. And I think that helps when you're parenting as well. But I said to her, things pass. Everything feels very intense, but things pass. And I've said to her, we can have this conversation every day if you want, because how you feel really matters to me. And I really care about how you feel, but I want to protect you. And I know that saying yes to social media is not the end of the problem. It's just the beginning, because then your fear of being left out, but then there's another app that you might not be. And before you know it, your life is taken over, because we know that's the way it works, because I'm on social media. When they wanted Snapchat, I downloaded Snapchat and I spent 3 days on it. And I think that matters to children, because it wasn't just a no, you can't have it because I said so. It was no, because I've been on it and I don't think it's good enough for you.
It's very moving the way you're languaging this. I think no, it makes me want to cry. I think to say to someone, it's because I care about you. It's not because I'm just saying no because it's a knee-jerk reaction, or there's something, or I'm a pain, or I'm a draconian parent. It's because I care about you. And then I care about you enough to go and try it out myself. So I'm not just saying no because I'm going to get informed. I think it's very helpful.
Well, I think children, they're often left out of the conversation as well. When I did my piece for The Guardian, they asked me for about 6 months to write it, and I said no. And in the end, I said yes, with the permission of my children. And I then said, I'll only do it if Rafaela, my eldest, writes a piece about, because they're so often left out of the conversation. Obviously, if you're talking about toddlers, you can't really interview a toddler. You could try. But I wanted her point of view, and she had her own editor, and I said, write whatever you want. If you want to write that it was the worst thing I ever did, then write that. Do you see what I mean? But she didn't. And I think children, don't we all really want to be heard and seen?
Cool.
You go back to your person that says they want attention. They want attention. We all want a certain type of attention. We all want to matter. And I think when you're just sort of treated as no child, and also think, what does that teach, especially girls? Alfie Kohn, I think he's an American psychologist, he taught me something really important. I interviewed him years ago. I'd not long started doing this column. And he said to me, I think I only had Raphael at that stage because I've got 5.5 years between my girls, which is a purposeful gap. And he said, so if you're going out and it's raining, what would you say to her? And I said, I'd say to her, "Oh, take your coat." And then he said, "What do you do if she says no?" And I'd say, I might encourage her, but then I'd just sort of say, "Well, that's how you'll learn, by getting wet." And he went, "No." He said, "All she'll learn is that you could have helped her, but you didn't." And it
Oh,
just floored me.
because
Said, "What?"
I've done the you thing. I've said, okay, that's fine. Don't worry,
Yeah,
okay, I'll just carry it with me. And if you want it,
no, no,
I'll put it
that's the
on me.
right thing to do.
Okay.
I was saying, well, no, that's how she'll learn. She won't take a coat, and she'll learn if she gets wet. And he went, all that she would learn is that you could have helped, but you didn't. No, you've done the right thing. You take it, and then you say, and then she'll be like, what mummy said was right, and she helped me. But I was still in that sort of like slight, I thought I was going to be like Captain Von Trapp in Sound of Music as a parent. I'm ex-military. I'm very kind of duh. So I thought that's what I'd be like. But I soon learnt that that's not really effective parenting, not how I wanted to be. I had quite a strong instinct, and
Yeah.
I kind of would try and override it a bit. And so he taught me that. And he also taught me that, if you say to, children, but especially little girls, um, do you want to wear this skirt? And they say no. And then you go, well, yes, you do. And you put it on them. You're teaching them that what they think doesn't really matter. So why are you asking them? And that children, as children, we internalize things to make the world safe. And so we think everything's our fault. So eventually that child learns that what they think doesn't really matter. So be careful what you ask your children. When they got a bit older, I still bathe them, I'd say, "Do you want to have a bath tonight?" And if they said no, I wouldn't give them a bath. I mean, how dirty, do you know what I mean? It's like people be like, "What about if they're covered in mud?" And I'm like, then I probably wouldn't have asked them. You have to be quite careful, I think, how you talk to children. But, I mean, in a way, you should get I'm doing a podcast with my children, actually, because it's
Great.
all very well me saying, I have a fabulous relationship with motherhood. I love it. But whether I'm effective or not is not for me to judge. That's for them to judge. They
Yeah,
might think,
and we think about what does effective mean. I mean, just came out. I think I read in a Dorothy Rowe book, or maybe I didn't, but I think it's not what you're saying. Little kid has dinner, goes to bed. Half an hour later, comes down and says to the parents, "I'm hungry. Could I have an apple?" This is actually me. I'm with me. And could I have half an apple? So they're not asking for the other half hour. And the parents go, "What do you mean you're hungry? You can't be hungry. You've just had dinner." So
mm.
that is a normal exchange in many households. But what you're telling your child is, number one, because your parents are God. So then you think, well, I obviously don't know myself very well because my parents have told me I'm not hungry. So just in that little exchange is I'm not really believed. Oh, I'm obviously wrong. And my body, I can't trust my body very well. It's telling me I'm hungry, but I'm obviously not. And so I'm not trying to guilt trip parents, but it's what you're saying is
I
how.
think it's just about looking things different. But also, it's like, if you came to my house and you didn't eat much dinner, and then you came down and you went, "Oh, listen, I'm a bit hungry," what would I say to you?
You'll probably go help yourself from my fridge, my love.
Oh, I'd say, "Oh my God. Oh, sorry. Did you not have enough to eat? I'll make you something." Why would I treat you differently to my child?
Yeah,
This is
you
what I
wouldn't say,
don't
well,
understand.
Lucy, you didn't eat your dinner, so
Yeah. Or
go
it's like
back to
when people,
bed.
if you're crying, would I kind of go, "Oh, she's just
Ugh,
attention seeking"?
that's right.
I mean, you might be, but you're
I
still
might-
crying and you need attention. You need some sort of attention. It's like when people say to me, "Are you sure the letters you get are genuine?" I'm like, "No, I can never absolutely know that. You get a sixth
No, of
sense." But if
course.
someone's making up a letter that's that detailed, they need my attention, or they need
Yeah,
attention
yeah.
of a some sort. Do you see what I mean? It's still a communication. And I'm just always surprised by how people treat children. I mean, don't even get me started on hitting children.
Well,
It's
you see,
just
we're singing from the same song sheet. I'm like, would you, it's not okay to go on hitting adults. So why is it?
no. But I grew up, in a culture that does hit children and still
Yeah,
does. And I struggle when I go to Italy and I see that. And I really, it takes a lot not to go and, smack my cousins around the face. Obviously, I don't, because that would be totally wrong and giving the wrong message. But you're trying to teach a child often about control,
yeah,
and you in that moment have lost control, apart from the fact that it's just pure and simple abuse. So
yeah,
I have never hit my children. I've
yeah.
never even been close.
No, neither have I, and I never would. Um, Yes. Okay. So let's remember. So did you grow up in Italy or you grew up here in the UK?
I was born in London, and when I was very young, we used to spend a big chunk of the year in Italy. And then my sister's older than me, so when she started school, obviously we couldn't do that quite so much. But we used to go every summer
And
and
both
other
are both
holidays.
your parents Italian?
Yes, they were both Italian, one from the north and one from the south.
So who was from where?
My mum was from Avellino, which is near Naples, and my dad was from Parma, which is up north, where all the lovely Parma ham comes from.
Well, Ham comes from. So you're Italian parents, but you're growing up in the UK. So how was that? Were you sort of culturally conflicted, or you know?
Well, it's like I grew up speaking two languages. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
I know what's Italian and I know what's English, but it's just normal. I mean, my mum was a fantastic cook. I mean, really, really excellent. And um, I grew up just thinking that's how people ate. Everything was made from scratch, even though she worked.
Wow.
Sorry, Lucy, my husband's just come back. I just wanted to see who was at the door. Even though she worked, really, really long hours, really hard. My parents owned a cafe, bought a cafe when I was 7, and
Yeah.
we never really had weekends after that, but everything was cooked. And I would help her starting things off. I would start off the bolognese, and I would start the roast chicken. And to this day, I struggle with knowing when a chicken's ready because my mum always came home and finished it off. I used to joint it like at a really young age and prepare it for the oven, but she came back, so I'm never quite sure when the I'm not confident when the chicken's ready. So it is what you know. I mean, the first time that things I noticed were different was I was at school and there was a boy and it was his birthday and he said, "We get to have steak." And I said, "What do you normally have?" And he said sausages. And I said, "Oh, to us sausages were a treat. My mum didn't let us have them often because she said she didn't know what was in them unless she'd made them herself." And we did have steak a lot because it was nutritious and fast.
Mm,
Um, and then in secondary school, I had packed lunches, and me and my Polish friend Alex, we would have yesterday's dinner in the sandwiches, but
right.
we would look at other people's sandwiches and think they had lovely sandwiches because they were like white bread and ham.
Yes.
Um, but it's really only when I got older that I realized that people didn't speak to their parents every day. That's completely normal to me. And then my first boyfriend was English, and that's the first time I saw freezer food. I had no idea people ate like that.
Did your mother ever do like shake and bake chips?
No.
Do you remember them? The shake and
Yeah.
bake.
No. Oven chips. We did have oven chips when they first came.
You were
That was
allowed oven.
exciting.
That
We
was
did have oven chips occasionally, but we didn't really have a freezer. So I think she must have bought them and then had cooked them straight away. We just had a little ice box, and yeah, I mean, she just made everything. She even made her own mince. And I used to go shopping with her, and it would take ages because she'd asked the butcher. Her father was a goat herder, so she knew all about animal anatomy. And in Sainsbury's, there used to be a little phone, and used to pick it up in the butchery department. And she'd get the butcher, and he'd come out and talk to her, and she would tell him how she wanted her meat cut, and he would do it for her. And shopping took ages because when you're a child, you're like, "Oh, please, can we just go home?" But I have so much admiration for her now that she did all that for us.
And did she like smell all the fruit and sort
Oh
of?
God, everything was prodded and picked up, and that's how you shop in Italy.
I know.
And
I mean, she must have come to the UK and thought, "What hell is this with this
well,
disgusting food?"
we still, I mean, I remember when kind of the, you know, the we had a greengrocer opposite us. So I remember when the supermarket started selling that because they didn't, you know, younger kind of people forget it's not like it is now. And when they did, it was like lots of loose. It was like a greengrocer in a
Yes,
supermarket.
yes, yeah.
But yeah, no, shopping took ages. But even now, I can hear her saying to me, "Oh no, no, Annalisa, no, that's not good. Don't pick that one up." And I think, but I'm a much quicker shopper than she is, so because I don't take as much care.
Were they happy here in the UK? I mean, that's a big question. I mean, it
I
must
think
have
my mum was. I think they
was.
came. I think my dad would have liked more space. They lived in central London. My mum hated the countryside.
Did she? Ha!
Yeah, I was always trying to get her to move to Suffolk, and she was like, "Oh, no, no, I don't want to live in the middle of nowhere." She moved from a really small village where everybody knew everybody's business, and she struggled with that. And I would struggle with that if I lived there. When you go back, it's great fun. But yeah,
Mm.
I think they were they were happy. They very much part of the community. And but to answer your questions, the cultural differences, yeah, but I wasn't really aware of them growing up.
So given the fact you've probably parented your children very differently to how they did, because that is, you know, you've done all this work and just generationally, did they struggle with that? You know, my mother always says to me things like, why are you so bless her, why are you so slack? Not slack, you know.
And what do you think she means by that?
I think what she means is, like, you know, she would see it as giving in,
Right.
to my, you know, giving in to my children. So that thing of not forcing them to put on coats and saying, well, just carry it with me, and if you need it, I've got it. Sort of, you know, and all that running around facilitating their lives. I think, you know, for her generation, that's
Yeah, well, I think also, I mean, my mum was one of 10. Do you think my grandmother had time to do all this
yeah, of
stuff
course
I
she
did?
did.
No, of course not. You know, so I think one has to look at the context and the support that one has. And I never in a million years want anyone to feel bad. That's the opposite of my whole aim. I'm very much about my relationship with mothering and what I do and what's worked for me and what's worked for us. But things that have helped me that might help others. Do they talk now? My mum was an amazing nonna, and I felt that she put right a lot of the things that she felt she hadn't done right as a mother, but would never admit it. She was very stressed and very isolated, and that's such a big deal because motherhood shouldn't be about being isolated. That's not how we've evolved to be. We are social animals, and we should, you know, from an anthropological point of view, we need people around us. My mum had no one. You know, in the 60s, you gave birth on your own. You weren't even allowed your partner. I don't think my dad was particularly brilliant husband in the early days. You know, he was an Italian man. He didn't change nappies. He didn't push the pram. But they were great grandparents. They were great parents in a lot of ways. They were fantastic grandparents. And my mum never really, I mean, if anything, I remember in the early days, and I wasn't sure what I was doing, my eldest threw something on the floor and I kind of picked her up and I sort of put her in the kitchen or something, which is, I think, the closest I've come to time out, which still fills me with horror, actually, because it's not what I'm really about. And my mum was like, oh, don't do that. She was quite soft, even though she'd have probably smacked us. But there was one time when my eldest was asking at the table about pregnancy and abortion, and not in those words, but she was kind of asking, you know, if you get pregnant, can you stop being pregnant? And I've always said that anything is up for discussion around the dining table. I've never shirked from questions about drugs or sex or anything at all. If one of my children asks me a question, I will answer it as age appropriately and factually as I can. But my dad was sitting next to me and I was talking to him about the pill and abortion, and I thought, oh God, he's going to be appalled with me. And then he said, it's very different from my day. He said, it's really good the way you explain everything to her. And even now it makes me quite choked up because it was his way of saying something. And I didn't expect it. I thought he'd say something like, why is she asking you all those questions? I wasn't really allowed to ask questions. By that, I mean, they were often not answered properly, or my mum didn't know and she couldn't say, I don't know. I quite often say to my children, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a gift.
You know, but so I was constantly sort of, is the English word stymied? I never know how to pronounce it. Stymied?
Stymied, yeah,
Stymied. Because
Yeah.
obviously, you know, as you know, being a writer, sometimes you write words and then you find on these things you've got to say them and you're thinking, I don't actually know how to pronounce it. So I didn't ask questions. And I think that's not a great place to be as a parent. You want your child to come to you for certain things. So, you know, I had to learn about sex from a book because I thought God gave you children.
Did you? I thought the stork gave you children.
Oh, the stalk, the cabbage patch. I remember saying to my mum, where do babies come from? Well, God knows when you get married and he sends you a baby. And I said, well, what about in films and you get married? Well, God knows the difference. And then in the last year of primary school, I remember hearing people saying things And I remember thinking, this doesn't add up. And I went to the library and I looked at a book, and I still remember this moment. I think there was like a pen and ink drawing of an erect penis. That's the bit I kind of remember. But it was very small writing, it was like a sort of late 1970s book. And I remember thinking, the book's wrong. This isn't how babies are made. And then my next thought was, Mama's wrong. And that was pretty fundamental, to think that your mum either doesn't know or has lied to you. That does something.
Yeah.
So I didn't want my children to be in that position. So I remember once explaining to my youngest on the train into Liverpool Street about how babies are made, and the whole carriage was listening. And I was just sat there saying, yes, and in an age appropriate way. And then she was asking more questions, and it was just hysterical. But I was not remotely embarrassed. But the reason I'm not embarrassed is because of my job, because we talk about these things so openly and freely.
Yeah.
I would have been embarrassed once upon a time, but I'm not anymore.
And it's such a strange thing to be embarrassed about. And I get it, but it's so weird because we've all been made in that way mainly. And
I think there was a lot of,
well,
there was a lot of shame around sex, wasn't there, for our parents' generation, and
yeah.
miscommunication. And, I'm sure our kids will probably be doing a podcast well, very soon probably, and talking about all the things we've done wrong. I mean, we do things wrong, and they probably will say, oh, well, I'm sure my children say, my mum was always asking how I felt.
Yeah, just
yeah,
well, like, put on the therapy voice, Mum.
So
what's the therapy voice? It's where they go, tilt your head, and you go. It's we have a joke.
Yeah, well, you are a therapist. I'm not, but my eldest used to have this fantastic persona that she put on called school therapist, and it was so funny. And she'd say, "So you're struggling with some feelings, are you? Well, you just keep them locked up tight in there." And it just used to make me laugh so much, because it was the antithesis
That's right.
of what they're like, but also what I'm like. But I think it was her way of kind of like, playing with it, but it still made me laugh. And even now and again, we sort of say, you're struggling with some feelings, you keep them locked up. That's not what we practically do, but we kind of like, because there is sometimes, it's a difficult balance, I think, to talk about feelings and sometimes just get on with life.
Yes, okay, I think that's right. So, yes, I think that's very funny. That's sketch. Feelings, keep them locked up. I think that's very funny. But so motherhood, without a shadow of a doubt, changes us. And I'm not saying that, and for all the people listening to this that aren't mothers, I'm not saying that there's a sort of,
you're no less of a person. But if you
exactly.
choose motherhood and you are able to have children, yes, I mean, I think it does. It changed me.
What changes did you? Some are expected. I think some are very unexpected.
I really struggled with motherhood in the beginning. I think that's really important to say. I was overwhelmed by it. I didn't really have the right support in place. My mum was amazing and came and took me home, and that really helped. A lot of the stuff I've sort of talked about, the things I do differently, I did in the beginning. I didn't know what my daughter wanted. I found that really challenging, because I like to think I'm about communication. I didn't know what she wanted. So I felt really judged by her, even though, God, she was just the most. I remember saying to her, when she knows what she's doing, I don't. And I still feel like that sometimes. But I didn't really understand. And what I was saying earlier about, there's a lot of things that you bring into, I think, into motherhood that you can project onto the baby.
Yeah.
I was physically, I'd had a very difficult birth, an emergency C-section. I hadn't slept for 5 days by the time I brought her home. I'm self-employed. I had, there was a lot going on. And so I really do understand, I didn't kind of go, oh, my beautiful baby, I love her so much. No, I felt very challenged by motherhood. I was 37 when I had her.
Okay.
And I had a full life, so it was a challenge in lots of ways. But how it's changed me was my children have enabled me to love and be loved without fear, I think. Now that needs a whole other conversation, which I'm not prepared to have here. But let's just say that in my past, I have tried to love people who weren't interested in me, people very close to me that I grew up with, and it caused me a lot of pain. And suddenly I was able to be me. I wasn't too much of anything. I was just, for them, I was perfect. And that really, really healed something in me. Although subtitles, children aren't there to heal their mothers. I did a lot of work on myself. I've had a lot of therapy
Yeah.
since I was, just out of my teens, and I continue to. And obviously, I get all these lovely top ups with all the therapists I speak to. So it changed me in the sense that it made me much nicer, softer, wiser, fatter for a while. I just really like my children. They are so lovely. I love talking to them. I love being with them. I get excited every day when the thought of seeing them or speaking to them. And I'm sorry if that sounds really twee, but that's just how I feel.
Doesn't sound twee. It sounds great. It sounds lovely. It sounds wonderful. So I think for a lot of people, when I had Raymond, my eldest, who's 29, I'd seen a woman in a park. She was lying, I think she was, and she had a baby lying on her, and they were looking at a book together. They were doing something together. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, that looks so peaceful and lovely. And when I had Raymond, I thought it was going to be like that. And
And it's not, no.
It so wasn't. And I got very depressed. I think I got quite ill. But people don't recognize that. And this is 29 years ago.
Mm.
And at one point, like you said, I left him at my mother's and drove back to London and pretended I hadn't had a baby.
I do really understand that. And I really want to stress, I really understand that.
Yeah.
It's really tough if you don't have the right support, whatever that looks like. And it's not, and I think expectations is a really big deal. I quite often ask my readers, what was your expectation of motherhood or moving or that job or that relationship?
Yes.
And I think that because we don't see that, they also don't factor in the tiredness or the fact that they want to read the story over and over again. And you're trying to get them to sleep when you yourself need to sleep, which is a very particular kind of torture. I get all that. Those early years are really, really hard.
Yes.
And if we had someone around us, who could support us, because the other really big thing is I could not be the mother I am if my needs weren't met. So I think as a mother, you have to really, really think about yourself and look after yourself, whatever that looks like, because you haven't got a hope otherwise, really sort of long term of being there for your kids. And a lot of women aren't supported, aren't appreciated. I mean, loads of women do this for, they aren't paid, they're at home, and and it's not regarded as it's the most important job in the world. I don't care what anybody says, it's the most important job. We should be on 7-figure salaries.
Yes. Yes. And this is what I really want people to hear. It's like saying to me, I am raising another human being.
Yeah. And,
for free. And I would like to be valued. Thank you very much.
And it's not. And, people kind of say, oh, she's just a stay-at-home mom. It's so stigmatized. But also, that support that we don't have that we used to. So my grandmothers didn't have the kitchen gadgets I have, but they had their mums, their sisters, their cousins, everyone around them. And I coined a phrase when I was a new mother, which was sometimes the difference between sanity and insanity is 5 minutes for someone to hold your baby while you go and have a shower and feel human again. And I did get quite angry at the social media now because I have some younger mums in my family, they're in their 30s and they say 20s or 30s, and they say to me, but on social media, and I'm like, you need to ignore social media. Those people with a kind of, wearing a white dress, and they'll say, this is me 4 days after having my baby. I'm like, really? Come on, who is this for?
Yeah.
Because that's not really, I don't think, realistic.
No.
For a lot of women, that wasn't my experience of early motherhood.
No.
And you're struggling with yourself, your whole body has changed, and yet you're supposed to look after this little baby who may well scream all the time, and it's really hard.
Yes, and I remember thinking, I'm just doing this little boy, this little baby who's apparently mine and isn't going. I kept thinking Father Christmas would come back and take him away, and I could go back to the life I had before, which I was actually quite liking. Thank you.
Were you able to admit that at the time?
Yeah, I think I did.
Because I think that's really important. And were you supported, or did people kind of make you feel like you were?
My sister, who's very sadly died very unexpectedly 3 years ago. My
I'm
sister,
so sorry to hear that.
my sister has 7 children. My
Wow.
sister is like uber mother. And I mean that in a beautiful way. You know, she was consciously mothering before people even knew about it. She was an excellent mother, very attuned. She just showed up in London, you know, and said, okay, with however many she had, she was about 3 at the time, and just said, okay, I'm here, you know, and just support, you know, I'll cook and I'll show you. I was bathing him in a bath and it was too big and he was scared. She was like, no, just bath him in the sink.
Mm.
You know, but not, you know, so that's what you need. And I think this is what we had maybe in societies that we don't.
Yeah, absolutely. Or someone to just say, you know, Lucy, just why don't you have a bath and I'll bath the little, you know, I'll bath your son and to kind of make it okay, but also to look after the mother.
Yeah.
And I think that unless you're looked after, it's very, very hard to draw deep into your reserves, you know. And then I talk to women who've had trauma in their childhood, and the motherhood can re-trigger that. And then they're dealing with ever so much and always feeling like the worst person in the world.
Mm.
Can you mother effectively when you feel like that, when you haven't attended to your own needs, whatever those needs are? It's just really, really hard. I think a lot changed when I could communicate with my children, when I learned to communicate with them, which goes back to my job and, you know, learning how to do that. But I mean, I don't know what you do differently, but I know what I do differently. If I could go back and have those early days again, I would absolutely do nothing. I'd make everyone else do stuff. I wouldn't try and kill myself by trying to keep everything together because it passes, that really intense period passes. And what you want to do is find that moment with you and your baby where you can both be looked after. And I'd say fuck it to the rest of the world, frankly.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. So there was a question I'd like to ask you that's gone. When now, I mean, I also have a very good relationship with my children. Well, I think I do. Maybe they don't. I think
We
I
should let our children do their own podcast and they can
Yeah, I
they
mean,
can
you know, they're my favorite people, and we have a lot of fun together, and we're very open, I think. But again, I respect their boundaries, right? So they want to talk to me about stuff that's up to them. Do people? I mean, I meet a lot of people who don't have that sort of relationship with their children. I'm not sitting here judging them, but do you find that people find it odd that you're so close to your girls?
I mean, I think we tend to surround ourselves with people that are similar to us.
Yeah.
No, what I get, which really sort of used to upset me but just makes me laugh, is people say you're really lucky. I am lucky in certain respects, or it's all right for you. Those are the two phrases that I have aimed at me a lot. When I just had my eldest, Rafaela, they were like, "You're just lucky." And I always joke that I take my 10% agent's cut. I always think it's her, but 10% of it is mine. I don't know what my husband thinks about that, but I always just, you know, so I take, I think I have had an influence on my children. You can't take the good without also taking the bad.
Yeah.
Um, and so they say that, but then I had another girl, Delphina, and then they're like, and I'm like, oh, so it's amazing how I've struck gold. I mean, I do say I've struck gold twice with them, but then I sort of think, again, it's about taking responsibility and the flip side of that. So what to answer your question, what do they find it strange? I don't know. You'd have to ask them if they find it strange. Quite a lot of, we don't really talk about how we do things with my friends. Sometimes we'll talk about, you know, I've got this issue, I've got that issue. But the flip side of that is that if they're unhappy or depressed, the first person I look at is myself. And I think, okay, what have I not done? You know, because they are the canaries in the coal mine. They often, you know, react to something happening further up the food chain, as I call it, you know, they're the parents. So I think, and I don't sit there going, this is all my fault. You know, I'm a terrible mother. I think, okay, what's going on here? What are they communicating? What do I have control over? What might have happened? I think that's empowering to think that, you know, but then also I don't sort of think everything's my fault.
Mm.
Gone off the subject again. I'm really sorry. I do tend to talk a lot when I get to.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Are you going to write a book?
No, I don't think so. I did start writing a book about everything I've learned as a agony aunt. I just when you actually sit down and write these things, I'm sure you found it with your books. it's quite hard to write these things without sounding like you think you know it all. And the point about it is I don't think knowledge is finite, and I don't think I know it all. I'm kind of a bit of I mean, I think I know a lot. I mean, I give myself credit. I know quite a bit. And I've become really good at thinking about things, but I don't know how that would translate to a book. And also books are such hard work. And I already have quite a lot on, so I don't think so. I do my podcasts and I let my specialists speak, and I hope that, yeah, so I don't think I will. I did try and I handed back my advance because
Yes,
it was
wasn't
just,
working for you.
it just wasn't working for me. So, but never say never.
Yeah, I just think a lot of what you're saying is so helpful and supportive for people. But I guess we're talking about you. So I was thinking, I've got 4 children, and each of them taught me something slightly different. My first son taught me how to be a mother, and I always say to him, "Poor you." I do the first when he was a teenager, and we'd be at loggerheads, and he'd go, "What?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, but we haven't done this before. I'm not a boy. I don't know what it is to be a boy. You have to tell me. You have to, I don't know what it is to be a boy. Give me information. Give me."
So you've got an elder boy, and then
I've got 3 boys.
right, and then
He
a
taught me
girl.
tolerance. He taught me how to be tolerant. He taught me, slow down, breathe, be tolerant. Just my second son taught me to relax, because he was like a little heavenly thing that just came from, he was chill. He slept. My third son anyway, he doesn't like me to talk about him, so I won't. He's very private. And my daughter's taught me, my God, what can I say? That could be hours. So what do you think your children have sort of taught you or helped you realize about yourself?
I think I've said it. I think they've taught me to love and be loved,
Yeah.
unconditionally.
Yeah.
And although I have to say, if I'm honest, sometimes love does feel unconditional. I'm not going to paint it as it. Sometimes you do think, oh, but they've taught me that really. They taught me that it was okay to be me, and I really like me now, but I didn't then. In terms of individual, more granular stuff, I can't really think of anything that I haven't already said. They taught me, practical things, but they taught me to be me.
They taught me to be me. And you really like yourself now.
Yeah, but I didn't used to like myself because I listened too much to other people who had their own goddamn baggage that used to project a lot of stuff onto me. So, I thought I was that person, but I'm not.
Well, that's a great lesson. That's a big lesson, isn't it?
Huge, yeah.
There's at least another hour or more in that. But yeah, learning to like ourselves, learning to know what's us and what isn't us is a big thing. But Liz, all that is in your columns. So where can people find you if they want to find your columns and they want to do a bit more reading, a bit more?
So my column comes out in the Guardian Saturday magazine every Saturday. It goes live the day after, i.e. on a Sunday. And my podcasts are called Conversations with Annalisa Barbieri, and they're anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And I started them really because I had such long and brilliant conversations with my therapists to do with work, to do with the column, but I had to, a lot was left on the metaphorical cutting room floor. And I thought it's such a shame because I'd always get off the conversations and go, I've learned so much, but I couldn't always include it. So that was a way of including it. And at first we thought about doing the actual conversation, discussing the problem, but then we realized that actually there was privacy issues there. So I just pick a topic of that I think is interesting or comes up a lot.
So people can find you that on all the places you get podcasts and everything we're talking about today. There'll be versions of that and help and therapists. You talk to a lot of people across the board. So that's brilliant. It's a great job you're doing for people.
It's a great job for me. I've learned a lot, so that's always a bonus.
We all learn a lot through it.
Well, I hope so. But I've learned a lot.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much.
Lucy, it's been great talking to you.
Thank you so much. Take care.